I used to think shadows were harmless, just silhouettes we drag around, vague, obedient shapes stitched to our feet. I never questioned mine. I never watched it. Shadows were routine, predictable, boring. And maybe that was the mistake. Maybe all my life I should have paid attention to the thing moving silently beneath me, because the night it walked without me wasn't the beginning. It was simply the first time I saw it happen. I live alone in a flat that never feels truly warm, even in summer. The place is quiet in a way that hurts, too still, too hollow, too aware of my presence. At night, the appliances click like they're trying to speak, and the walls breathe cold. I never thought anything of it. I just assumed loneliness had a sound, and this was it. My job doesn't help. I work night security in an office building downtown, a building with polished glass, empty cubicles, echoing corridors, humming lights, the kind of place that attracts no one after dark except cleaners and people like me. Quiet, tired, drifting between obligations. Most nights are painfully uneventful. Just me and the cameras, me and the hum of electricity, me and my shadow. Maybe that was why I never noticed the first signs. Or maybe I noticed and ignored them because admitting the truth would mean admitting I wasn't safe in my own skin. The first incident happened on a Wednesday. I remember because I had been half asleep all day, struggling to wake up for my shift. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth, staring into the mirror with that blank expression people wear when they've done the same routine too many times. The overhead light flickered, just once, a short dip in brightness. But in that second, something shifted in the reflection. My body moved normally, hand lifting, shoulders relaxed, eyes drooping from exhaustion. My shadow didn't match. It rose slower than I did. Barely a fraction, but wrong enough that my brain tripped over it. Its head turned toward the hallway before snapping back as the light returned to full brightness. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth. My reflection looked normal again. The shadow behind me was perfectly aligned, innocent, motionless. Nothing out of place. Nothing that suggested it had ever drifted a millimeter out of sync. I stayed in the bathroom longer than I needed to, pretending to clean the sink, pretending not to stare into the mirror's edge. Nothing else happened. The shadow was obedient, still, faithful. I left the flat 15 minutes late and told myself I'd just been tired. But part of me stayed behind in that mirror, staring at a shape that didn't quite belong to me. Work offered no comfort. The moment I sat in the control room, a headache formed behind my eyes. 8 monitors glowed in the dim light, showing empty corridors, stairwells, storage rooms, break areas. All still, all quiet, all lifeless. Around 2:17 a.m., camera 4 caught movement. A figure walked into frame, tall, thin, blurred slightly, as though the camera struggled to focus. I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. It wasn't unusual for cleaning staff to pass through, but something about the way this person moved sent a pulse of unease through my chest. They walked with a strange rhythm, not slow, not fast, delayed, like their steps didn't match the soundless corridor around them. The figure stopped beneath the fluorescent light. The harsh white glow cast a sharp outline across the floor. Except there was something missing. The shadow didn't appear. The figure stood motionless, but the space around its feet remained empty. No distortion, no darkness, just a flat stretch of tiles. My stomach tightened. Then, with a sudden liquid movement, something seeped into view. From beneath the figure's feet, darkness rippled outward like spilled ink. It thickened, stretched, rose. It peeled itself from the floor, forming height, forming shape, forming a silhouette that looked human but wasn't bound to the figure that cast it. The shadow moved forward. The figure did not. The shadow turned its head toward the camera. Not the figure, just the shadow. And in that moment, something primal inside me recoiled. I felt exposed, watched, singled out. My fingers curled against the desk as the shadow stared straight into the lens, as if it knew exactly where I was sitting. Static hissed across the screen. The picture blinked to white. When the feed returned, the hallway was empty. I rewound the footage so fast I nearly jammed the keys. But there was nothing. No figure. No shadow. Not a single frame out of place. Just the hallway. Quiet and clean. I sat there alone, breathing too fast, the hum of the monitor sounding suddenly predatory. I didn't report it. I didn't mention it to the cleaner who arrived at 3. I barely spoke for the rest of the shift. Because the shadow's outline, the way its head tilted, the angle of its shoulders, it all looked too familiar. Too much like me. I convinced myself I was hallucinating. Stress, fatigue, overwork, anything but the truth. Because shadows don't move like that. Shadows don't separate. Shadows don't stare. The next week I kept my head down, worked, slept, moved through life like a ghost, until the night everything fractured. It was a Thursday. I was walking home alone, grocery bag in hand, the cold air biting at my cheeks. The street was empty except for the long chain of streetlights stretching into the dark. My shadow walked ahead of me, long and thin on the pavement. I wasn't thinking about anything, just the weight of the day. Then the streetlight above me flickered. In that flicker, my shadow took a step forward without me. It moved freely, deliberately, and for the first time I saw its movement fully, clearly, undeniably. I froze mid-stride. My shadow didn't return to me. It stayed one step ahead, planted like a separate figure. My hand lifted. The shadow didn't mimic it. I whispered, "No, no, no, no," under my breath. My shadow's head tilted, slowly, curiously, as if it were seeing me for the first time. I stepped backward, trembling. The shadow stepped forward, opposite, defiant, independent. The streetlight flickered again. In that stutter of brightness, the shadow snapped back beneath me. But I didn't believe in that illusion anymore. I walked home without looking down once. The cold air felt wrong against my skin, too heavy, too aware. Small things started happening after that. Shifts and reflections where nothing should shift. Extra silhouettes in the corner of my vision. Movements that didn't match mine. Tiny delays, tiny accelerations. I thought I was losing my mind. But the real breaking point came 3 nights ago. I came home exhausted, dropped my keys, turned toward the hallway. My shadow was already standing there, not on the floor beneath me, not attached to my body, but 20 feet away, at the end of the hall, standing upright like a person, tall, still, facing me directly. I felt the world go silent in a way sound can never fully capture. The hallway stretched long and narrow, the shadows clinging to the corners. My shadow didn't move, didn't flicker, didn't align to any source of light. It was waiting, and then slowly, with a smoothness no human body has, it raised its arm and pointed at me. My breath hitched, the lights dimmed, my pulse stuttered. When the bulbs brightened again, it was gone, back beneath my feet. Harmless, false, but I knew the truth. I could feel it in my bones, in the cold crawling beneath my skin. It wasn't following me anymore. It was practicing, studying, learning the distance between us, testing the limits of light and space. It didn't want to belong to me. It wanted to walk on its own. And it was close, so close, to figuring out how. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't turn off the lights. I sat awake until the sky softened, afraid that if I let the room fall into darkness, I wouldn't be the one casting the shadow anymore. I stayed on the sofa until sunrise, every lamp in the flat burning like a desperate prayer. The shadows in the corners didn't feel still anymore, not like darkness, but like something holding its breath, waiting for the chance to move. When the first thin gray light pushed through the blinds, I finally exhaled. My body ached from being locked in place for so long. My eyes burned. but dawn felt like a knife between me and whatever had stared at me from the end of the hallway. I kept the lamps on anyway. I didn't trust daylight to be enough. For hours, I drifted around the flat in a daze, checking the walls, the mirrors, the floor, watching for even a hint of movement that didn't belong to me. Every creak of the building made my skin crawl. Every shift of brightness across the floor made my stomach clench. But the shadow stayed ordinary, flat, predictable, perfectly obedient. Too obedient. By the time I had to leave for my night shift, my head felt stuffed with cotton, but I forced myself out. Staying home felt dangerous. At least the building had cameras, eyes that could catch what mine might miss. I walked to work fast, keeping under streetlights, checking the pavement every few steps. My shadow followed me perfectly. Not ahead, not behind. Exactly where it belonged. But I felt watched, not from outside, from underneath me. Inside the building, the air conditioning hummed softly, colder than usual. The lobby's glass walls reflected my shape back at me in long, stretched silhouettes. I looked normal, but I knew normal wasn't real anymore. When I reached the security room, I locked the door and stood still for a full minute, listening to the building breathe. Then I took my seat and stared at the monitors. 8 camera feeds, 8 empty corridors. Empty looked dangerous now. I wasn't going to check old footage. Not tonight. Not after what I'd seen. I would watch the live feeds, keep the lights on, stay alert. For the first hour, nothing happened. Then camera 6 flickered, just once, barely a blink, but I'd seen enough flickers to know what they meant. I leaned forward, dread tightening my spine. The hallway on the feed looked empty, sterile under the fluorescent lights. Nothing moved. Then the lights in that corridor dimmed slightly, as if something tall had passed beneath them. But the space remained empty. My breath caught, another flicker, then a third, and suddenly, for a fraction of a second, the kind of moment your brain tries to pretend didn't exist, I saw a shape on the tiles, not a person, a shadow, just the shadow, stretched long without a body to anchor it. It moved across the floor with a strange smoothness, edges trembling like heat haze. When it reached the far wall, it rose upward in a thin vertical smear, climbing without anything climbing with it. Then the feed blinked clean again. Nothing there, no movement, no shadow. I scrubbed backward, frame by frame, but the moment was gone, erased, like it had never happened. The system was lying for it now. A cold sweat broke across my neck. I sat back, watching the monitors with wide eyes, adrenaline burning through my exhaustion. Minutes passed, then an hour, then something worse. Camera 3 lit up with motion detection, just a soft blinking icon but enough to command attention. I clicked the feed open. At first, the corridor looked empty. Then something stepped into view. It was me. Same jacket, same build, same tired posture. But I wasn't in that corridor. The figure paused directly under the ceiling light. The brightness washed over it, but the shadow it cast was wrong. Too stretched, too dark, delayed by a fraction of a second, like it was thinking before reacting. The double lifted its head slowly, too slowly, and stared into the camera. I stared back, pulse hammering. The other me didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't move like something that carried weight. Then its shadow peeled slightly away from its feet, just a centimeter, just enough to break the laws of light. And the figure stepped backward into the dark, dissolving like steam. I sat there in frozen silence until something else caught my eye. The floor beneath my chair looked darker than it should. I forced myself to look down. My shadow lay under me, but a second shape pooled beside it, just a shade deeper, just a touch sharper. It wasn't separate, not fully, not yet, but it was close enough to spill into me if it wanted. The overhead light buzzed faintly, dimming for a heartbeat. That second shadow twitched, as if bracing to rise. I stood so fast the chair toppled. The moment my body left the light center, the second shadow flattened, hiding itself inside the first, pretending. I didn't finish my shift. I didn't even pretend to. I walked out as soon as the morning staff arrived, barely managing to look normal as I passed them. Outside, the early light made the world look washed out and colorless, but that didn't comfort me. It only made shadows more defined. I kept to the edges of buildings on the walk home, avoiding sunlight as much as avoiding darkness. Every time I did pass under a street lamp, I watched the ground like a hawk. My shadow stayed where it should, but I sensed its attention, like something waiting for me to make a mistake. Back in my flat, I locked the door, then locked it again. I paced the living room in tight circles, watching the carpet more than the walls. Nothing moved, nothing separated, nothing flickered, for almost an hour. Then the sun dipped, and the room grew darker by a shade. Just a shade. My shadow lengthened a little. I watched it. It watched me back. I don't know how I know that, but I do. I stood in the center of the living room and said, in a voice that barely worked, "Show me." At first, nothing happened. Then the lights flickered, just once. And in that split second of dimness, my shadow stepped a half step forward. When the light stabilized, it snapped back under my feet like nothing had happened. But now I knew the truth. It wasn't asking for permission. It was waiting for a chance, for darkness, for stillness, for one moment off balance. I backed away slowly, every muscle trembling. Then I saw something in the reflection of the window, a faint outline of me in the glass, dimly lit by the city outside. Except the reflection wasn't matching my posture. I was standing frozen, stiff with fear. The reflection was leaning slightly forward, as if listening, as if eager. A sick, icy pressure pooled in my stomach. I stepped out of the window's light into the deeper part of the room. For one heartbeat, I cast no shadow at all. And in that vacuum, something slid into place on the floor where mine should have been. The shadow stood upright, not attached to me, not belonging to me, just standing, waiting, and with a slow, deliberate motion, it lifted its hand. Not to mimic me, but to reach toward me. That's when I understood. It didn't want my movements. It wanted my place, where I walked, where I stood, where I slept, where I lived. And it wasn't learning anymore. It was replacing. So if you're hearing this, tonight, stand under a light and lift your hand. Watch the ground. Watch carefully. Make sure your shadow is still following you. Because once it stops, even for a heartbeat, you've already lost the first step.